There's a lot of wrong ways you can use non-scale tones, but there's some very right ways that you can use them. I'm going to start at C, and I'm just going to work my way up to C a couple octaves higher, and I'm going to use that enclosure on each note. So for the root, the second, and there I get a sharp root as my approach to the second. And then the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, root, second. Whoop. A little sloppy. And that's a really practical way to practice your scales if you want to really develop some really rich sounding jazz phrasing and stuff. And you can do it with arpeggios. You can practice your arpeggios and your scales that way with that whole enclosure concept. So remember, scale step above, half step below, target note. The scale step above in some cases is going to be a half step, in some cases it's going to be a whole step. If you're at the fourth or the seventh, sorry, the third or the seventh, then your scale step above is going to be a half step. If you're at any of the other notes in the scale, it's going to be a whole step above. But it's always a half step below, which is what gives you your chromaticism. So that's a really good way to use neighboring tone, or sorry, approaching tones. But they don't have to be used that way. I could just go. And I'm not really using that enclosure concept. I'm just approaching by a half step below, and that's it. And that can work anywhere. You'll find certain notes in the scale that it just sounds very tasty, like that example from before. The sharp root to the 2 on a minor chord just sounds gorgeous. It works on a major chord too, right there. With sharp 2, or sorry, sharp root to the 2 to the 7 to the 5 to the 3rd. And I keep throwing that in, and that's not an approaching tone. That's the other thing that I wanted to talk about. Those are neighboring tones. A neighboring tone, if you know the blues scale and its difference from the pentatonic scale, here's my A minor pentatonic, and here's the A minor blues scale. And it's that note in between the 4th and the 5th there, that's a neighboring tone. So a neighboring tone is anytime you have 2 scale tones that are a whole step apart, and you just fill in that gap with the note that's in between them. As long as you're not landing on the neighboring tone, well, if you did, then it would no longer be a neighboring tone. It would just be a outside note. So right there, I used okay, C major 7, root to the 2 to the 7. Sorry, 2 to the root to the 7. Right there, I used a neighboring tone between the 2nd and the root. And then I used an approaching tone to the 7th. And that's some really close together sort of phrasing right there. All the notes are very nearby each other. So in that case, that typically makes me want to tack on some notes that are bigger leaps apart from each other. So in that case, I like to kind of just work my way down the arpeggio from there. I'll do that a lot. There's a lot of ways that can be used. So all I can say is really start experimenting with that, especially over some backing track. So what I want to do here is I'm just going to play this track here. It's G minor 7 to C7, back and forth. So this is a 2/5 vamp in the key of F. First I'm going to play using no chromatic notes, all diatonic. Now I'm going to start using some chromatic tones. I'm going to use some neighboring tones and some approaching tones. By the way, that's Jamie Aebersold play-along CD from the book Major and Minor. Very good stuff. It's 2 CDs. Highly recommended for practicing and stuff. So, neighboring tones, you're just sandwiching a chromatic note in between 2 scale notes, a whole step apart. You can do that with any of your scale tones too. It doesn't matter how crazy it seems to you. Just try it, listen to how it sounds, get a feel for how you can use it rhythmically. There's a lot of different ways. And neighboring tones, no, those are neighboring tones, sorry. Approaching tones, you're just basically approaching any note by a half step below. And of course you've got your enclosures where you're approaching by a scale step above and a half step below. Now remember, you can go scale step above, target note, half step below, target note, or you can go scale step below, scale step above, half step below, target note. So, yeah, I hope you get some good usage out of this, and we'll be talking about a lot more here in the future. So, thank you. Good evening.